Welcome, everyone, to another edition of The Travel Show with your host, Ted Blank of Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventure. And I got to tell you that when I heard the theme today, I was like, well, of course, this is very exciting. Ted, is the theme about love because we are celebrating our second anniversary?
Well, it could very well
Excellent.
be. It could very well be.
I'm liking the sound of this.
Yes, we are. And we should remind everybody that we have that second anniversary contest.
Yes.
So you can win a $250 certificate towards a Princess Alaska cruise. Just go to the KDWA Facebook page, and pinned right to the top is the entry form. So you can go enter there and win that. But we're not going to talk about that today.
Oh, we're not? What are
No.
we going to talk about?
We are going to talk about love, but a different kind of love.
Okay, let's hear.
Maybe. Well, it is that time of the year, the most romantic season of the year, and I thought it would be a good time to talk a little bit about destination weddings.
Oh, yes, those are very popular.
Yeah. Now, before we start, I actually learned something a couple years ago that was interesting to me. Do you know what the number one day on which people get engaged is?
Is it Valentine's Day?
Well, I would have thought Valentine's Day,
or Christmas.
too. It's Christmas Day.
Okay.
Actually, so yeah, Christmas is the number one day for wedding proposals. Valentine's Day apparently is a close second.
And that's why all
Christmas.
of those wedding fairs are always in January.
January, February,
Yeah.
March. Yep, absolutely. So this is the season that people are starting to think about planning weddings, and certainly a lot of folks might be considering a destination wedding. So I thought we could kind of talk about some of the pros and cons and lessons I've learned in planning destination weddings over the years.
Oh, I love this. This is very timely.
Yeah, well, we should have brought some little sweethearts along. So another little trivia question for you. What are the top three? You have to get all three right.
Uh-oh.
Top three destination wedding, international places people go to get married from the United States.
Is it countries or?
Countries, yep.
Okay.
Countries.
Italy, Mexico. What's a third country?
Home of Bob Marley.
Oh, Jamaica.
Jamaica.
Really?
Yeah. So actually,
Okay.
Mexico's number one, Jamaica's number two, Italy is number three.
Okay.
So, a lot
What
of
do I
folks...
win?
Well, we'll have a prize for you next week. You had to get them in order.
Oh, I did? You didn't
What
say
do they say in
that.
Jeopardy? It has to be in the form of a question.
What is Italy?
What is Italy? But it's interesting because, really three very, very different
No kidding.
places. And, a lot of folks, certainly the idea of a wedding in paradise is attractive, but Italy, totally, totally different. So I think that's, maybe the first myth that's out there about destination weddings is you have to do them in the Caribbean. And certainly a very popular place to do them, but you can have a destination wedding pretty much anywhere in the world. And I've planned weddings in Mexico for folks, in Jamaica, Italy, Switzerland, France, Greece, all over Europe. Sometimes the requirements for the actual marriage can be kind of complicated. So some folks do end up having a symbolic ceremony overseas and having the real ceremony back here at home. We've also done destination weddings on cruise ships.
Are you a wedding planner?
I'm
Ted
not.
Blank?
I'm actually not a wedding planner at all. No. So we actually really don't plan the wedding part of that. We kind of manage the travel piece of it and the destination, the resort,
That's
the
a
cruise
big
ship.
piece of it.
Big piece of it. So they will have a wedding planner available for you, or if it's a more customized thing, we'll help you find a local wedding planner who can manage the details of the wedding. But the travel part of it is a really, really important part of the calculus that goes into a destination wedding.
Planning a wedding is difficult anyway, but you factor in a destination wedding that has so many moving parts. So how would you begin to do that yourself?
Yeah, in
you
some
have
ways,
to have some help.
You really do. And in some ways it's easier, and in some ways it's a lot more difficult. I
Okay.
think the first thing is really to plan ahead, and probably 2 years is kind of a good planning window for a destination wedding. That may be true for a wedding here in the United States too. I know a lot of venues are already booked up for,
Right.
weekend dates in the summer of this year. So that's not that unusual for
So don't
folks
go
to
on
be...
2 dates like I did and get engaged.
Well, you can as long as you wait 2 years for the wedding. But planning ahead is important.
Wow.
And then certainly if you're planning or even thinking about a destination wedding, reach out to me, reach out to a travel advisor, and have a real honest conversation about it. Because it's very, very different than planning a wedding here in the United States. And part of that is just attendance. The world has changed since, I was a kid, since you were a kid, and since, most people met someone in their hometown and got married in their hometown, and, most of their friends and family were kind of in their hometown. That's different now. So even if somebody is marrying someone else from Hastings, they may have friends and family who are coming from all over the country for that wedding. So people are more and more used to traveling for weddings. But doing a destination wedding overseas, it's a little bit of a different ask for people. And I think for the bride and the groom to be really cognizant of what they're asking of their wedding party, be realistic about how many people are going to say yes and how many people are just going to say no thanks is an important part of the conversation.
Well, I think that's really being honest.
Yeah. And being honest about the budget, both from your perspective and the perspective of your guests. And what I found is that the most successful destination weddings kind of fall into two categories. And the first one is what I would call the encore wedding. And what that means is maybe the first time around it didn't work out, or someone passed away, and someone's finding the second spouse. And those tend to work really, really well for destination weddings. I think for two reasons. First of all, they tend to happen at a little bit of an older age. So the bride and groom, their family, their friends are at a stage in life where they have a little more money to travel. And they also probably have a little more vacation from work. And, you think back to when we were 20, 21, 22 years old and had our first jobs, we were lucky to get a week of vacation, on Memorial Day if we worked on Labor Day. And so folks who are older, I think, have the benefit of that little bit of extra time to use for vacation, because you're not just asking folks to invest money in a trip, you're also asking them to take some of their kind of hard-earned vacation time and spend it with you. So I found that those encore weddings work out super, super well for destination weddings. And then for folks who are getting married for the first time, I found that it tends to be folks who are in their 30s who do the best with destination weddings. And the corollary to that is it's also the folks who are willing to put some of their wedding budget into kind of subsidizing travel for the folks who are coming to the destination wedding. So I did a wedding in Switzerland right before COVID, and the bride and groom gave everyone in the bridal party $1,000 to use towards their flights. And that was sort of in lieu of a big party, big dinner or something like that. They kind of figured their wedding budget and said, okay, we're going to set aside a piece of that.
That was really
to help
generous.
Folks. That was really generous, but it also, every single person they invited went. And oftentimes with destination weddings, someone might invite 100 people, 150 people, and only get 20 people to go because it might not be within their budget. It might not be within their time budget. It might be tough with kids to juggle things. And so there's a lot of decisions that the folks going to your wedding have to make. And I found that offering a little bit of, financial help towards it can go a long way towards making it more successful.
So are you able to help people not only with the flight piece, but then also where people are staying?
Yeah, so there are kind of three ways to do it. One would certainly be to do it on a cruise ship. And I think, what's more romantic than, getting married on the Love Boat? I can't think of anything.
I can't either.
But that is a neat thing to do. And a lot of folks...
And they will do that for you?
Absolutely. And they've got great wedding coordinators, beautiful venues. You can do it on a day at sea. You can do it in some ports when the ship is docked. I mean, they do a really nice job with weddings. And a lot of folks want to go on cruises. And so I've actually found that those are a little easier sell than some of the resort wedding vacations. But certainly resort wedding vacations are a second option where you'd go to either an all-inclusive or a European plan non-all-inclusive resort and get married there. Most people who do that will do 3, 4, 5 night trip. They probably won't go quite up to a week, but give folks the option to come down a little early or stay a little longer if they want to.
And it's more enticing, obviously, if the weather is cold where you are coming from. And
so that's a place where there's another little caveat, and that is that the most popular dates for weddings at the best resorts fill up really, really far in advance. And so if you're looking to do a weekend in January, February, March, we might be out to 2027 at this point with some of the better resorts. Weekdays are a little better, but a lot of times it's kind of a little bit of the off season for folks who wait and don't really plan really, really far in advance. They may not have that choice of dates. And so it might be going to Mexico in October, which great, nice time to go, a lovely time to go, but maybe not when people would be thinking about taking that vacation there. But the great thing about resort weddings is that there's sort of no limit to what can be done on site. And some cruise ships and many all-inclusive resorts will offer complimentary or very, very discounted wedding ceremonies and wedding receptions if you have enough people to form essentially a wedding group that comes. So that can be a way to, stretch the budget a little bit.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's very, very super, super popular. If you ever go to a resort in Mexico or Jamaica, just sit outside the wedding chapel and kind of count the number of weddings that take place there. The tough thing, though, is that if you're not honest about your budget with yourself and you don't have a healthy enough budget, some of the less nice properties, the more moderately priced properties, their weddings are kind of cookie cutter. And the challenge is, over the course of that week, they might have 30 or 40 different wedding ceremonies. And that's every week throughout the year. So what we found is that a lot of times the wedding planners at those resorts put everything together at the last minute. Now, that's fine because everything usually comes together. But if you're planning your wedding, you probably don't want to wait until 2 weeks beforehand to choose your menu and choose your decor.
Especially if you've waited 2 years.
You waited 2 years. So it can cause a lot of stress for the brides and the grooms. And I think that's a challenge. So, being able to think about having a budget that's high enough to work with a 5-star resort, I think really makes a difference in the wedding experience as well.
So when you put these together, do you work primarily with families or are you working with a wedding coordinator?
So generally it's going to be the bride and the groom.
Mm-hmm.
Generally. Sometimes it may be their family, their close family, their parents. In many cases, parents are paying some of the cost of the wedding, and so they have a voice in the plans. And I think that's really important because understanding what's kind of the financial model behind this really helps me and my team make the best recommendations for you. So that's an important part of the conversation. Generally speaking, though, the wedding coordinator is going to be in the destination, whether they're employed by the resort, whether they're employed by the cruise ship, or whether they're kind of a freelance person who you can hire to help you plan the wedding. The other thing to keep in mind is that, a lot of your vendors, the photographer, the baker, all that stuff, you're going to be working with folks who are local to that destination. And that's great because you can have some really unique, creative things that you couldn't get done here, but you're not going to have as many tastings of your wedding cake. And, you may have to choose a photographer based on just looking at a portfolio of pictures. And so there are a lot of trade-offs that are involved. And I think it's important in that kind of initial conversation to talk through all of those and make sure that practically speaking, this is something that's going to work for you and your wedding party and isn't just, kind of it's great to have that fantasy of being married on a beach and barefoot, but what does that really look like? And is that going to be the right thing for you? And I don't think that's any different than getting married here or anywhere else. There's a time at which all of those practical decisions have to be made. But with the destination wedding, you make a lot of them right up front. And if you don't do that with kind of a clear head and open eyes, you can sometimes end up a year or two down the road getting close to the wedding and it's not going to be what you want, or you're not getting enough people to go, and that can cause some stress too. Whereas with the wedding here, you could always swap out a caterer, you could always swap out a photographer. It's just easier to do that. Where with a destination wedding, some of those decisions have to be made well in advance.
Well, how do you decide, or how do you know how many people are going to participate in a destination wedding? I mean, that's tough.
It's very, very variable, I would say.
Okay.
And kind of a rule of thumb
is
that it'll never be more than 50% of the people you invite. It'll probably be less. And one of the things I like to do is actually have the bride and groom make a list of everyone they're going to invite, and then go through and kind of highlight the people they think are going to be the most likely. And for a lot of them, maybe give them a phone call and say, hey, this is kind of what we think about it. Would this work for you? Before you make a commitment. I know a lot of people like to send out the save the dates and be really clever about that. And that's fine. But if it's too much of a surprise, it might not be might not be the right kind of a surprise. So have some conversations with folks, understand whether they would be interested in something like this, or they would prefer not to. And that drives the decision too. Same thing with your families. Are the close family members committed to it? One of the other things is, who would actually be going? Are there going to be kids involved in the wedding, in the wedding party? That can make a big difference in terms of the selection of resort or selection of destination. Time of the year can make a big difference. Where are people coming from? If you have a lot of folks who are coming from smaller towns that don't have real good air service, that can really
That's a
deter
hardship
people.
then.
That's a
Yeah.
hardship, and it can really deter them from coming. It's much easier to fly from Minneapolis to Cancun than it is to fly from Thief River Falls, Wisconsin, or Thief River Falls, Minnesota to Duluth, and it's going to be a lot more cost effective to do that. And so those are all just very practical things, just like, how many layers do you put on the cake, and, which plate pattern do you want to have, and all those things. And it's just important to have kind of that same level of conversation about the travel side of things that's a little less important when you're doing a wedding that doesn't involve that much travel.
Have you ever had people that wanted a destination wedding and then come to find out they just used you for a honeymoon instead?
That's actually probably the most common situation. And next week we'll talk about honeymoons. That'll be our topic.
Excellent.
The week of Valentine's Day. But yeah, that's actually very often what happens. Or sometimes people want to do sort of like an elopement, which is a much more simple ceremony, and that's a great option as well. And especially I think with younger folks who most people only get married once or twice, and so just not even understanding all the moving pieces. And that's something that I can do, is help to explain them to you so that you can understand them and start to think about those decisions and make the best decision that's right for
And
you.
I think COVID really changed the way we look at big gatherings. And I do know a lot of people that want a more intimate ceremony. They don't want a big 500-person invited wedding here in this area.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who have that perspective. Yeah. There are also a lot of people who have the perspective, it's been too long, we're going to have one heck of a big party. And so it can kind of go both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ted, really good information. I had no idea that you did marriage counseling.
No, I don't do that. No marriage counseling. Nope.
Wedding planning.
Yes. No. Destination wedding planning.
Destination. Yeah. Well, it's great information. How can people get a hold of you, please?
Yeah, sure. The best way to get a hold of me is to call me at 651-964-8245, or you can visit my website, tedblanktravel.com, and on there you can request an appointment, and we could sit down and have a conversation about that dream wedding and see if a destination wedding is going to be the right fit for you.
So fun. Great information.
Thank
you so much. Ted Blank, of course, is the host of The Travel Show.